All right, so we're gonna touch upon a bit of audio as far as we can, as far as we get into it in what we do. We usually typically only do music, right? Maybe a voiceover. Sometimes we do a little bit of special effects here and there, just sound effects. But it's not too much, right? So, but we'll go at least through the basics of what to look for, so that your audio is not all clipped or just bad audio. So, I have three audio samples in here that I'll play for you without any of the effects they have on them. And again, it's this super simple stuff. There's not a lot a lot of magic that goes into it, and most likely you already know the basic stuff, but we'll go through it anyways. So voiceover, right, is the first thing we have in there. The voiceover, we obviously hired talent for, right? We have a script for. We record in a studio. We don't record here at the office. We record scratch tracks at the office when we do the animatic and the rough cut and the fine cut while we're developing the voiceover, or the client is developing the voiceover. And so it's either Dave or someone just records here in the studio. We have a little booth and we have a microphone. We record the voiceover for timing purposes, for making sure that we put it to the film and that things are looking and sounding well, that things are making sense. So once that's done, we hire talent, just as we do for a green screen. We cast a couple guys, right? And we talk to clients about what do you want the voiceover to be. Do you want it to be female, male, British accent, no British accent?
Those are the only options.
Because when we were doing, that's really it.
British accent, no British accent, male.
When we were doing a lot of stuff in the Middle East, they wanted English with a British accent sometimes, and so it depends on the market or who are you trying to reach out to. So we send the client a couple of clips of the voices of the different people that we think fits the description that was already agreed upon, and they choose, right? We choose together with the client, and so we book the time in a studio, and then we basically get on either go to the studio and record with them, or do it over the phone, which is very common, where they can actually just patch you through while the whole recording is taking place, and then you can directly talk to the talent that's in the booth and say, well, that sounded a little, too. Put more emotion here, put more emotion there, put more emphasis on this last, sentence. Read it again. Really, it's too fast. Or right there, do some edits, get rid of that word, so you can have options and different takes, right? So what you see there in the top represents that. These are all the different takes that Vasily took from all the clips and decided those were the good ones, right? And we had to get rid of a lot, because otherwise the guy would be speaking throughout the whole thing. So you can see there's very few spaces here, here, and here, right? And so the audio there, because it comes from a professional studio, it should be already very good, right? You can see the waveforms are good. They're not clipping. They're not going all over the top. They're also not very low. So you have what you need is pretty much what you get of an EXR or a well-exposed photograph. Same thing, right? You don't want to clip it. And then we get these tracks from online services, right? From Killer Tracks. What's the name of the other ones? There's many online services that you can buy stock music, right? From. So
Killer Tracks is the one that we go to most, though.
This clip in particular, it's an okay clip. So people, at home make music, they upload it, and that's the end of it. But many clips do come with a bad mix, or they're clipping, the audio is clipped, and then it's unfortunate because you're kind of reviewing these things online and you're listening to like an MP3 sample of it, and You can't really tell these things until you actually bring it into a program like this and start seeing the levels of the clip. But in this particular case, they're good clips, and let's say just this little part in here. This guy actually came in like this, there. So that S, at the end was a little over the top. So it's very straightforward. You can literally grab this thing and normalize it by hand. It's slightly better, right? It still was a little clipped, but it's just the S, so it's not a big deal. So you would do things like that. Phrase by phrase is going to be different. Sometimes you're going to get audio that has noise in here where it's supposed to be silence, right? And in Audition, it's very, very easy to get rid of all that noise throughout the whole clip. You can sample that noise just as you would sample noise on an image and tell the program to get rid of all that noise throughout the whole clip. You have to be careful with it, though, because it can get rid of some real audio, just as you have to be careful with denoising your images, because you can get rid of some detail. So it's the same logic applies to this thing. Just quickly, if you go to your effects, and then you go to, of course, this is the here, the noise reduction process, right? Then you're going to capture noise, which is basically that area that I had in there. As you can see, there's not a lot of noise. Then you hit apply, and that's the end of it. So you're going to have to select the whole clip and apply the effect again for it to do it to the portion that was not selected. So that's a very straightforward exercise, right? You would do that, for example, when we record a scratch track and there's a little bit of ambient noise and stuff like that, and we just clean it up a little bit. Or if you had the bad luck to receive a voiceover that was already recorded and that's all you have, and then you have to tweak it, that's what you would do. So then comes time to do the music, right? Or let's say that, let's hear this.
The building is designed to evoke an authentic extension of the neighborhood with a series of intimately scaled walkways and blocks that lend themselves to discovery and exploration.
So it's a little muted, it's not that crisp, right? And it's very straightforward. You just need to do either a graphic equalizer or a parametric equalizer. What that means is graphic equalizer is what we all would see on a stereo on your dad's, right? Your dad's stereo with the big thing with all the knobs and all that stuff. And then the parametric equalizer, it's the exact same thing except right here, it's just curves, right? So it's the exact same thing. So low end and the high end.
The building is designed to evoke an authentic extension of the neighborhood with a series of intimately scaled walkways and.
So the effects are off. Let me turn them on so we can hear the difference. I'll turn off the one that's in there, and I'll use the parametric equalizer.
The building is designed to evoke an authentic extension of the neighborhood with a series of intimately scaled walkways and blocks that lend themselves to discovery and exploration. There is great possibility and promise around every corner.
So it's, there's presets in here that you can use. Rap vocals. Let's see what that is. It's got to be cool, right?
The building is designed to evoke an authentic.
It does a little, it does a little bit to it. It's not like anything too eccentric or crazy, right? But but do you hear the difference? It's actually, these presets are going to be actually very helpful when not really knowing how to use these programs. We are by no means experts in audio mixing, but going through these presets, I've learned through the years that it teaches you, what these do, what the equalizers, what the changes are on the equalizer, and what the changes are. So it'll basically, by trial and error, you can learn how to sweeten some audio clips that you get that you had no control over, right? So the other thing that you would do, so in this case we used just a graphic equalizer. By we I mean Vasily, and we basically just did the vocal presence and just boosted, which is literally just the 2 kilohertz here band. Then after that, and the levels were pretty good in here, so I don't think there was a need to change that much, except we went up in the volume here with the curves to, it's at 0, so not too much up. So in analog audio, if I remember correctly, you wanted to not go over 0 decibels. I think in digital audio, the equivalent of 0 is 3 or -3, is it? Yeah, -3. So try not to go, if you're in between the -3 and the 0, you should be okay. Just try not to clip it ever. So then we have the music track here in its original state. I'll open this closer so you guys can see it. So so you can see the thing is not clipping, but it's getting very close to 0. There. And you know, quite frankly, it's kind of like borderline in there. So if we were to give it another shot at this particular clip, I would definitely bring this down and normalize it a little bit, you know, just to have some room, because then you're going to be adding the voice on top of it, and then you're going to be equalizing it, and then you're going to be keep expanding and expanding the waveform. So again, just like in an image, you don't want to clip it. I'll leave it the way it is, because that's the way it was done at the end ultimately. So if we play the 2 just like they are, you're going to have a very hard time hearing the dude, the voiceover. The music is over it, right? Obviously. So a very simple exercise really is going to be for you guys to go, and now that the Creative Cloud comes with all these programs, you guys have these, you know, if you have the Creative Cloud, you have all these programs, might as well start using them. So what you see here, this waveform here, these curves in here, are the volume literally going up and down, right? And that really is an exercise anyone can do, an exercise that you can just grab your headphones. I would advise you buy high quality headphones for that, or a good quality, decent quality speaker monitors. You're gonna spend, you can spend $400, $200 on a decent, you know, desktop pair of speakers. You can spend thousands of dollars also, but there's no need for that kind of stuff, right? Unless you have the cash. Go ahead.
And you should give it to us first before you do that.
To try 'em. So, same part, and then you. Hold on, I have to mute the one at the bottom. And there you go. So it's literally that, right? It's just making sure that the voice can be heard. And I shouldn't be speaking over it. So it's just making sure that the voice can be heard, right? So then at the end, in this one, again, we were a little lucky that these 2 clips were decent, right? And then you have another equalizer on the music in here. And it was just, again, I'll make this solo it so we can hear the difference. That's without it. And that's with it. It's just giving it a little bit more body to it. And there's also some presets here that you can. There's some presets in here that you can use to start with, right? So now you have the voiceover, the music. In theory, the levels are already what you want them to be. I've done this in a few different ways. Right now you can see the curves are soft, are smooth curves. I worked in doing TV commercials for a long time, and I've seen many people not even use the curves, just do straight ups and downs, right?
When you're doing stuff like in Final Cut, usually, I mean, if you're putting cross dissolves in between things, you could, achieve the same sort of thing.
Yeah.
There's obviously a longer roll off with these things that could be.
There's
desirable.
also, in these type of programs, right now this is a manual, adjustment with the curves. You can also record your adjustments on the sliders. So you can literally play, record, and and when you mix it, when you do the final mix, as if you were mixing on a real console, or you can have a console that is actually connected to a piece of hardware that controls the program, right? So you can do all that stuff. Again, this is just a voiceover and a song, so it's not like you need the whole setup for that. And this is as far as we go here at Neoscape. When we do need to have a Foley recording or a custom music made and things like that, then like we talked about the other day, do you want to do that? Do you really want to get into that stuff, or do you hire a professional for that? So we like to hire a professional for that kind of stuff. This is as far as we would go for audio. So then at the end we have the mastering here, which again is just a parametric equalizer in there, and then you have all these presets in there.
The building is designed to evoke an authentic extension of the neighborhood.
And you can
A series of intimately scaled walkways and blocks that lend themselves to discovery and exploration.
you add some reverb to it
There's great possibility and promise around every
if you wanted to. Again, it's personal taste. Does it work for your project or not? You don't need to be a sound engineer for this stuff, as long as you follow the simple rules that you would follow for your images with the audio. So that's pretty much it for this guy. Any questions? Oh yeah, one more thing. There's this other workspace here that you might want to use. This guy. It's going to be helpful to know what your audio is doing. For example, if I mute or if I solo the voiceover. Hold on. I had the one spot where there's no voiceover. See that at the bottom?
unlocks Lower Manhattan's waterfront potential.
That's completely mono. The audio is completely flat and absolutely flat, and it's just the voice right in the center of your audio, right? If I solo the music, then you're going to see that there's an even wider spectrum, and that is good, right? It's good that basically professionals use these graphs to understand how it's like the levels or the curves on an image. It's just a graphic representation of all these, of the information that the audio has, and professionals use it to change things, to know if they're using the lows or the highs or not, or the mids are being used or not. When they mix things, they have for example, for a band, they have the bass guitar on X frequencies, and then they have the drums or the kick drum on a different frequency, because you don't want them to cancel each other, and so on and so forth. So you need to use these guys to know what you're doing and make sure that this is not happening. What you see there on doing this kind of stuff. Question?
Just out of curiosity, if you were doing a music with voiceover in 5.1, would it show on that graphic on the bottom exactly where the...
In surround sound?
Yeah, in 5.1 or 7.1, so you know exactly where the sound would be coming from.
I think it shows. I don't know. I've never done it, but if you're gonna be doing that, I would suggest that you do that in Pro Tools and not in Audition, right? And I'm sure that this thing has those capabilities too. But the only times that I've seen that done was in Pro Tools. So, if there aren't any more questions, this is basically the simple setup for the music and voiceover that we typically do in here. And it's mostly music. There's 80% of our films is music, and just not that many have voiceovers. Actually, this one we ended up axing the voiceover for this project, and it ended up having only the music.
Like the last day.
Yeah.
We were working on it.
So, moving on. Yep.
How do you synchronize the voiceover with the video? The Audition has a monitor for that?
Audition has a video window that you can bring in. You can bring in your video, and you would see it there. But these two clips were exported from Final Cut, where we already had the cut, right? And then Vasily just brought them in here. We edited, and then we just brought it back. But yes, Audition has a video window that you can just put it in there and just sync everything perfectly.
Oh yeah, if you wanted to sync up multiple.
Yeah.
Have you ever used Pluralize?
No.
Yeah, it's that would be if you had multiple sources. And you wanted to, if you had like multi-cams, or if you're getting different places. And sometimes people use Pluralize for if you have like an on-camera mic and you're doing an interview, but you have an external recorder, you could, it'll just go in and it'll basically just match the waveforms up. It just looks for similarities between them, so it'll take a lot of the guesswork out of that, or a lot of the time and effort of going through and lining things up for you.
So we're gonna move on to color grading and color correction. So that's, I want to start with the difference in between the two of them, which is, you can read online all you want, and people can tell you all they want about the two of them and what the difference is in between them. Color correction is what was basically people started to do color correction in films like Contact. Remember, with Jodie Foster, that they filmed all these digitally. Anyways, they start doing that there. I think that was the first film that they did the color correction, because they shot all these different shots of one sequence in different places at different times, and they had to match color, right? So color corrections is stuff they do when we do a film like the South Street Seaport, where we shot with 5 different cameras with different color profiles at different times of day. You name it, they're all different. The white balance was not the same for all the cameras for whatever reason. So you want to make sure that you make all your shots even and flat. You don't. It's like again, we go back to the master file. Right? So that is color correction, making sure that all shots are within the same color balance, same contrast, same whites and same blacks. That's the key. Color grading is stylizing that. Is when you see the blacks are green in the matrix, right? Where just recently watched the movie Spring Breakers, and color grading is all over the place. Take a look at that film. It's like this surreal dream of how it was filmed. I mean, the film is a little questionable. But I mean, I was amazed by it. You know, I was on a flight. I was like, oh, I'll watch these things. Vasily's fault. He gave it to me, and I loved it only because of the color correction and the color grading. Because every shot is different, and one thinks that, you know, oh, it all needs to be the same color palette and the same everything, and not true. I mean, rules are rules, and they're meant to be broken and whatever. And that's exactly what we're going to be doing right now. We're going to break the rules because I'm no colorist, and no one here at Neoscape is a color grading expert, right? It's ultimately what you want to do, how it looks, if it looks good or not. Same thing with an image. Just don't clip it. Just know the basics. With audio, don't clip it. You know, grade it, do whatever you want with it, but within the boundaries of a certain amount of knowledge that we need to have, right? So that's really the difference in between the two of them, and that's why we insist on having our comps, whether it's done in After Effects or in a Nuke, to be as neutral as possible, so we can later, you know, go crazy with the color. So let me find. In our process, through the years, we did, you know, we tried all file formats, and then we went to EXRs, and then, you know, the EXRs come into After Effects, and then from After Effects, everything, it's wrong, right? It's not 16-bit, it's 8-bit comps. We render to ProRes, and then we bring it into Final Cut, and then in the process of rendering a QuickTime, there's a gamma shift, and then you bring it into Final Cut, and then there's another gamma shift, and it's a nightmare. Because before, we used to do a lot of the color grading and color correction on the After Effects comps. And you render them, gamma shift, put them in the edit, you see them in a broadcast monitor, and the artists are like, well, why does it look like that? You know, what happened with all the contrast that I had in that shot and all that stuff? And so it's not ideal. So what we have been trying to do recently is, and what we used to do, sorry, is just color grade in Final Cut. It's very simple. It doesn't need to be, you know, it doesn't need to be a, you know, like a special program or anything like that to color grade or seeing all these fancy graphics, you know, that show you the RGB levels, the Luma levels, the you know, vector scopes and stuff like that, right? What's that?
I don't think it matters.
No.
Whoa.
Can you find the while we figure that out? So we don't have. So I wanted to show you 3 examples of the same clips of one of our films in 3 different programs. So our process is going to change slightly so that we can actually keep the dynamic range all the way to the end of the process when we speed out the final compressions. So I have it in Premiere because we don't have Final Cut in here. But in Final Cut, if we find ourselves doing heavy color correction, for example, in this guy, I showed you the other day the split screen of a couple of clips, a couple of films, right? This one, more than a color grading exercise, was a color correction exercise because we had clips from everywhere, and I did all these in Final Cut, only with a 3-way color corrector, just the blacks, mids, and whites, right? And a vignetting we had a few plugins, the Misfire Vignette, and the Lux Diffusion, and I'm missing one. No, I'm not. No, what we do is the three-way color correction. You can do it twice because you have to do another three-way color correction in Final Cut or in Premiere. Only because if you want to change only the sky, or you do a selective color just to adjust it. But that's as far as I can take it, or we can take it in Final Cut or Premiere, because it's not a tool to do that. You can do some, but as you can see, you can dramatically change the way this looks with just those tools that I told you. It's not it's not that complex, and I'll show you in a sec. So so these two clips were shot at a different time. So on the left, that's how this aerial footage looks originally. And on the left, that's how that clip looked originally. The difference was that the camera had a different filter on it, right? A cool filter versus a warmer filter. So we had to make them look the same. So on the right, hopefully they look at least closer than on the left, right? So that's what I mean when this was an exercise of color correction more than color grading, because we wanted to make sure that the whole thing matched as close as possible in terms of temperature and exposure and all that stuff. So this clip and this clip and this clip did not look the same at all originally. Then there's these clips that are slightly darker that needed to be somehow made look more like this guy.
Just as a sort of reference back to where we were before, those were the hilly clips where all that noise was in there.
Oh yeah, so there's no noise in here.
And you can see that we got a lot of it out.
This used to be those clips. So look at that, the difference in between left and right there. This was, there was a lot of blue in here. We had to go for the purples and the pinks that the helicopter footage had. Same thing here, blue, purple, right? So that is an example of what I would call a color correction exercise and not necessarily a color grading exercise. In that particular case, because we were under a tight deadline, I basically did the two at the same time. I was trying to stylize it as much as possible, but at the same time, just making sure the clips were consistent. On this example, I'm going to show you. It's just a bunch of clips from this project that you guys are already familiar with, and they're like from all different types of. They come from all different types of cameras and times of day and stuff like that. This one is a little bit more of a color grading exercise that we did at the end. But here in yes.
Did you correct the color before composing the 3D or after? Did you correct the colors before or after composing the 3D into the?
In the comps, we try to keep it neutral, so you can do color correction in the comps. You have to do color correction in the comps because you need to match the CG to the backplate or vice versa.
And the color grading you do afterwards?
The grading would be afterwards.
Okay.
So that's the true post-process portion of that with the grading is that it's like that's your stylistic choice at the end. Like when you push it the colors certain ways.
So you can see here. The only two things that I did here was I forgot the curves is what I was missing. There was a fourth layer that I always use in Final Cut or in Premiere. Is curves, three-way color correction, and then just because we have the plugins for a vignette and a diffusion in Final Cut, I use them there too. but ideally I would want to do that afterwards. So here in Premiere, we only have the three-way color correction and the curves. So I'll turn this stuff off so that you can see what's going on. So that's what the red footage looks like. Pretty dull, pretty scary looking. And you want to start with something very basic, right? With the curves. Want to add some contrast to the image, and it's really only an S curve to the whole image. You can actually color correct or color grade with the curves on the color curves if you wanted to make it, change the temperature of it with red, blue, and all that. But again, it's not typically the way I got used to doing it. So just the curves for the contrast. Then you have the three-way color correction in there, in which basically I'm gonna add a new one to not undo that guy. I want to reset it. Right? So in this particular film, I went with a lot of purples and oranges, and actually that reminds me of a tool you might want to use for this in choosing your colors or your color palette for your color grading. There's a website. Give me 1 second. I have it here. Well, there's a tool for Photoshop, right? That it's a plugin called Coolers or something like that. That it's pretty cool.
K-U-L-E-R.
This guy,
Oh, that's not it.
Coolers.
I don't know what that is.
That is a plugin. That is a plugin. It's a pretty cheap plugin that you can buy online. Google it.
People trying to figure out how many confusing ways they can spell color.
Yeah, and basically you can do what I want to show you here on this website is, I thought I had it in here, but it doesn't matter. If you just Google color palette generator, let's see.
It's a color.
So, but this is the guy that I use. This is the one that I like the most. So this is very cool because you can get the complementary colors, the triad,
Christmas.
right? So
I know personally, I never feel very comfortable with my color selections at all. So when I certainly like to get some little bit of help every now and then from tools like this.
So it's very nice, to have this reference, and then you can save this. We use it also for when we do renderings, and you want to, set the tone or the mood. Choose the colors wisely, and use these. There's hundreds of these tools and websites and stuff like that. So that plugin, you install it in Photoshop, and then you have the exact same thing you see in here. Well, it generates you select your primary color, and it's just going to choose the complementary colors for you, and it's just you can go from there instead of having the blue sky and then the purple reflection of the sky and being all over the place. So going back to this guy, so without going too much into the technicalities of this, it's very straightforward in that I want to explain a little bit of. You're going to find, depending on the software, that the shadows, the midtones, and the highlights can be named offset, gamma, and gain also. So, and that is because when there were video, they were trying to, they're doing video color grading. You know, they were using tools that were not really to do color grading, but they were misusing them basically, and started to stylize video. Those settings came from there, or those names, offset, gamma, and gain, and they just stuck, and the circles with the colors in all the color grading programs also come from those devices, those physical devices that had their little joysticks and dials to, you know, make sure that they had the right values, that video had the right value. What's the name of the I'll remember in a sec. Yeah, there was a name to the so it's video amplifiers that they were using to do these things. Is the telecine. The telecine that they were doing. So it was video amplifiers, and they were basically misusing them, and that's where all these things came from, right? So again, that's like the rules and broken rules, you know, got applied right there. So these stuff, if you choose, you know, let's say we chose our oranges and the blues, as is the most common one. You just basically want to make sure, you know, you want to make your shadows blue. You want to make your highlights, you know, towards the yellow. There aren't that many highlights in here. It's more. So I'm exaggerating obviously here to, you know, see the example in there. But this is something that is really going to take time for anyone, but it's not that complicated. It's literally just dialing those guys in and out in there. You can also shift the hue of what you're doing there, right? So in my experience, it's been a whole lot of trial and error to get the look I want for a particular animation, and not that every animation we do has a particular look. You just want to make it look good. You want to add, you know, that extra level of color or desaturation or saturation, like this. The City Point film was very Instagrammy looking, lots of orange, and, you know, almost like duotone in a sense. So you play those. We play those things by ear, and we like to play with those things, right? So the final one was this guy in here. For whatever reason, we decided to do that at this time. We have the shadows towards the blue, the highlights towards the yellow in there, and a contrast. And it makes a dramatic difference, just those two little things in there. One thing then that is important is what's the next shot, right? And is the next shot going to have, what does it look like? Compared to this guy. So you're gonna want to go shot by shot and compare your first shot, the shot you had, the previous shot, to the next shot, and even the next shot, right? So come to this guy, and typically the way I do it is you color correct the one shot, color grade the one shot, then copy and paste all those settings to the next one. If the shot was shot with the same camera, with the same settings, on the same, you know, setup, it's gonna kind of get you almost all the way there. This particular case, it wasn't that. That wasn't the case, but it is, for all intents and purposes, the same thing. I'm still going for the blues in the blacks, and I'm still going for the yellow in the highlights. Then there's all these other settings here down here that I wanted to saturate it a little bit more in there. Change the saturation of the shadow too, or the saturation of the midtones. These by default are 100 in here. So you change those guys, change those values, you're gonna get obviously different results. So then we added some curves to it too. Let me just get rid of that split. Same thing, an S curve. You don't want to clip the blacks on this thing, but you can go a little darker here if you wanted to. It looks way darker on the projector in there, but I can actually see here on the monitor where the clock hits the table. So as long as you don't have pure black in there, you should be good. And in this particular guy, in this particular shot, you can see that it's not as saturated as this guy. And I was having a very hard time in Premiere to saturate it even more with the tools that I had in there. So I ended up adding a little bit of extra help with this little plugin in there to saturate it more. So you can see the difference there. Next shot, it's again different camera, different time of day, and you want to make sure that it has the same colors as these three guys in here. So that's how it looks like that nuke comp that I showed you earlier in the morning is this guy right here. And the only problem with this was that it was already clipped here in the white on this building. So there's not a lot I'm going to be able to do with this guy here on Premiere to fix that. You can fix it a little bit, but it's not going to be the ideal scenario. Also, it's not, it's not a big deal because that's not the building we're focusing on. These guys are going to be, and the cut would not show that much. These are just random shots that I chose. So same thing, we're gonna do some curves. Sorry, we're gonna do the three-way color correction in there. That's the difference. See how this changes a little bit. I couldn't get away only with the blue and the yellow on the highlights. I had to go with the yellow or the orange in the midtones and make the highlights towards the blue. So you're gonna have to experiment there. It's not gonna work the whole time, obviously, because they're all different. And so that's what that guy looks like, with and without. And then again, just play with these settings too. Not too much. I try not to play with them. I try to keep within the three-way color corrector in there. Then we have the curves. Exact same thing, except in this particular case, I did modify the red a little bit because I wasn't getting what I wanted to get. This is what it was looking like without it. And it was just a little bit of that red that made it look, in general, more or less like these guys. Just the warmer tones of the whole thing. So then there was a pure CG and some green screen people in there. That's when it becomes more complicated. It's not more complicated than you have to use many more different tools. It's just harder to color correct a CG backplate with people, or color grade, however you want to call it. But regardless, it's the same thing. So you're going shadows, want to make sure that your shadows are going to the blues. This one, because it's more in line with the aerial shot, ended up doing the midtones also going towards the orange and the highlights going towards the blue. Then the curves. in there. And you can see this one already has some vignetting in there because the comp had some vignetting. That's something that you want to avoid. You want to make sure that all those optical effects, you do them after, because then you're constrained to that. So make sure you do all your glows and your lens flares and your vignettings and all your optical effects after the fact.
But it's worth noting that, and we touched on this earlier, like feel free to explore some of those looks ahead of time. You know, we talked about like when's the best time to do those things. I mean, proof of concept and look development and all that, just keep those sort of in your back pocket or turn them off for a while and let the process sort of happen. And then at the end, we can put some of that stuff back on with information that we've now derived from some of the color grade, some of those processes.
So this is trickier, right? I wanted to show you this example because this was supposed to be at night, but we shot it during the day. We shot it like at 5 in the morning, something like that. So did some crazy purpley black kind of color in there. There isn't a lot of color in this shot. The car's black. There's not a lot of light, but we went for that. I had to, if I had done the blue like in the other clips, then it looks like nothing. So I had to shift it a little bit more towards the pink in there, the magenta, to the purple. And then same thing, an S-curve in there to give it a little bit more punch.
Do you use any color checker targets on your shots?
The what?
Have you used any color checker targets on your shots?
Before we shoot?
Yeah, no, shooting. Yeah, exactly. Before you shoot, just to see
white balance and all that?
And then color match it and... yeah,
Not very frequently. We do use cards to white balance, especially on green screen shoots. On these guys, we basically have all of our cameras already set up to have all of our DSLRs need to have the CineStyle profile, the Technicolor CineStyle profile. That gives you a little bit more leverage. It flattens the image a lot, so it gives you a little bit more leverage for that.
And a little tip, if you do go out ever and you don't have that loaded on your thing, go to ProLost. I don't know if you've ever heard of that. Stu Mashowitz. There's a certain ProLost flat setting, which is very similar to the CineStyle profile. It's again, goes back to the same exact thing we've been talking about. Flat as possible so that you're not clipping whites and crushing blacks. It's all about just keeping as much information as you can.
So with the red, it's obviously, the red color space, the red format, and that's it. We try not to fool around too much with temperatures and things of that nature, because ultimately it's raw, right? And you can always change the white balance or the white point on them. So we don't worry too much about that. So that's that. And the last shot. So that shot, that's the raw clip, or well, from Nuke, because it already has the buildings in there. So it most likely it has already a little bit of a color correction.
Not much. Oh, the color correction was done
Yeah.
to match the building, yes.
Yeah, so there was the color correction done so that the buildings blend with the backplate. And we did just the purple instead of the blues to match the rest of the film. And we added contrast to it. That's as much as you can do on an editing program, as much as you're going to be able to do in Premiere or Final Cut. Another technique that we've used in the past and that we actually did use for this particular film was export the edit from Final Cut into an After Effects file. So I'll open that example of these exact same clips. The cool thing about that is that you're basically sourcing the same stuff that the comps are sourcing. So you're sourcing the original red footage, you're sourcing the original, comps and all that. So you're not working on a compressed or pre-rendered images.
Do you have any specific preference for the monitors that the editors are using?
Yeah, we have 2 Panasonic broadcast monitors. So all the color grading and the color correction gets done on those monitors. And we'll show you afterwards, and we can maybe post a photo online of the edit room. We have, just to finish answer this question, we have the broadcast monitor, a plasma monitor, and the computer monitor, and then we check it in as many monitors as we can check it. But the broadcast monitor is the one that you use to do that.
So there's a question online here. It says the three-way color looks like color balance in wheels. Is this correct? And what's the usage of the rotating the circle?
Rotating the circle just changes the hue, right? It's a hue. You have your adjustment and then just rotate the hue. What was the first part of the question?
It's just commenting on how the three-way color looks like color balance in wheels. Is this correct?
Yes. It in theory is pretty much the same thing. But you're working on your shadows, midtones, and backgrounds. Yeah. Give us 1 second to figure this out. This looks. Is someone using it?
Well, I think so. I mean, we can do the demo. I mean,
it's fine. Don't mind the red X. So here we go again. So this is the exact same clips, right? And the cool thing about it, as you can see here in the layers, is that this is actually the original red footage that you have here, the color corrected shots that came in from either Nuke or After Effects. They're here, red footage. So you basically have not lost all the information with it here. And then you guys work in Photoshop all the time, so you doing this in here would be very easy, right? For you guys to just layer things and create, like even if you don't have the plugins, you can just make the glows and the vignettes and all those things very easily. You can just make them as if you were doing them in Photoshop. So for this particular shot, we have same thing. Have a hue and saturation in here. Sorry. Color finesse is the first thing I want to show you, which is, again, if you notice in Premiere, I use the curves like this guy, and the kind of like a three-way. Instead of, in this case, it has a master hue, and it has the shadows, the midtones, and the highlights. So it's starting to get a little better as you come, into a program that is more suitable for this kind of stuff. Start to get more tools to do this, and then you can go fancy and go to the full interface of this thing. Yeah, this is it's a little scary. And you can see all the graphics that I was talking about the other day, right? Oh, earlier, sorry. You see all the curves. You see whatever that is. You see whatever that is, and whatever this is. So here you have all the different options. So, if you know about color, for example, when Dave and the film team had to fix those clips that had the noise on them, they actually had to fix it on the YCV, right? On this guy, YCVCR, and so there's a lot of theory that goes into this that I don't think that we need to get into, because number one, I don't know most of it, and number two, it almost doesn't matter to if the end result is the one you want, right? So no, I don't use this interface. I use this interface. the simple interface, unless you really have to start changing the green on the plants, or maybe you want to change the light inside the door for it to be cooler instead of warmer, right? That's not the case.
And you can do that in other effects in After Effects without having to go into the color finesse, dialogue, anyways.
So then, again, the two plugins that I talked about that we have in Premiere, in Final Cut, that we use, Lux and the Misfire suite, that I don't think they sell anymore. Right?
No, Misfire it's there.
Just
comes with Lux.
Yeah, look at it. Look at the Misfire suite, and it's pretty cool. So Lux, the vignette. Everyone knows what that is. Just a vignette, right? We can adjust the intensity and the size of it. I particularly like that vignette a lot. Then for Lux, I'm only using this as a diffuse plugin. You can see it there at the top, on the top left, minus the red X.
We could also do like a glow on that if if you're only using Lux for that particular reason, you could.
So if you didn't have Lux, if you didn't have a diffuse, you can, if you change your comp to a 32-bit one.
Ooh,
as you can see,
nice color grade.
It looks exactly the same in here. So this is the interface, and then you can add all these different effects, but really don't use them that much, only because it's easier to add a diffusion with this thing. I use it like that in here, right? So if you didn't have this, you can basically change your comp. Right now it's a 16-bit comp. You could, in theory, just add a, what's the name of it, Dave? Glow, where is it? Stylize. Glow. And you're gonna have to tweak it, obviously, right? And the tricky thing about this glow is that I think it's a 32-bit. If you do an 8-bit comp, it's not gonna work properly. So you either have to do 16 or 32 for it to work properly and get the right levels or the right values and all that. But you can get the exact same thing done with this. And the vignetting, you could just do with duplicating, like pre-composing your comp, duplicating on top of it, do an oval shape mask, feather it, and the vignetting is not just adding like a black edge around it. It's going to be that changes the saturation, changes the white levels. It needs to respect the white levels if you want to. So it's a little bit more complicated than just adding a black edge around the image, but you can do it. It's just as you would do it in Photoshop on this thing. So then at the end, a little bit of hue and saturation. I'll shut the looks down, and that's pretty much it. It's pretty much the same way it looked like in here. Minus the...
Ours is a little glowier in After Effects.
Minus the glow, right? So more or less the same purples, more or less the same contrast, and all that. So you do the exact same thing. You come to the next shot. You grab these adjustments, and you copy and you paste them. Paste them like we did on the previous one, and you go so on and so forth. One cool thing to do about this guy when you're color correcting in After Effects is that you can just make a quick snapshot of the previous shot. Lightning fast. Take a photo, come here, and compare it.
It's also the F5. If you hit Shift F5 and F5, those are the hotkeys.
So you tweak it a little bit, and then you can come back to the previous one just to make sure that your colors are similar or within the same ranges, right? So little camera in here, take snapshot. Little dude in there, show snapshot. Very useful. So same thing in here. For some reason, Lux is working on this one.
Maybe we crashed their thing.
Yeah. So original footage, color finesse, Misfire vignette, diffusion. Now it's not working. And hue and saturation. And it actually, the order in which you have those adjustments in After Effects changes the way things look. So if I put the vignette at the bottom, it's not as strong.
It goes from top to bottom. You gotta you keep applying them, and as they go lower in the stack, those are the ones that take priority.
So that's it for this guy, right? Same thing here. They start, you start to get, the deeper you go into these programs, the more flexibility you start to get, and the more options you have to make your image look more stylized. Is that a question?
And just to know, how do you export from After to Premiere? Which format of it's?
What formats?
Yeah.
I'll let Dave.
How would you
compressed
export?
AVI or a sequence of TIFF?
How would you export from After
Yeah.
Effects to Premiere?
Yeah.
In that instance, well, I think you can actually open up. From not
The Premiere file, you can open it in After Effects, right?
Yeah, I mean, there's certain things like dynamic link, but
do you use this?
we not in this instance. What we actually have used, and it can get confusing sometimes, to be quite honest, because we went up using some scripting. I think, did you say automatic duck? Is that there's a tool that's called automatic duck that can help to translate things between the different formats like Final Cut, Premiere. A lot of things leverage Premiere XML at the base, and we have some scripts that will actually take an edit out of Premiere and go into After Effects with it. So I think that's the path that this thing followed, is that we used that, to bring what we had done in Premiere into After Effects.
And you don't need to, you can see that the shots here are way longer, right? If, from my perspective, all I really wanted to get from the edit is the right sequence, and not necessarily if we had a cross dissolve or like a weird cut or anything like that. I want to make sure that I go through all the shots, that they're consistent, then I export them back and I give them, we replace them in the edit, and that's it. So do you need to really have like this flawless connectivity in between the two programs? That'd be ideal, but you don't need to. Now, once we get to speed grade, which is going to give you more flexibility, there's a new feature that it actually will allow you to hit a button in Premiere, and it'll bring your edit to speed grade. You're going to grade it, you're going to hit another button, and you're going to be back in Premiere.
We're very excited about that.
Yes.
I think that one of the components of the question was when you're coming from After Effects, where you're using specialized plugins, back to Premiere, you have to export into a format and open and replace shit clips. So what format and what codecs and what would you prefer? And I want to know myself.
I mean, at that point, if we're going from, we end up rendering out of After Effects. In some cases, we'll render out ProRes 422. That won't have as quite a good color quality as a 4444. So that traditionally, I don't say traditionally, but in recent years, that has been the process. We've been exploring new methods, actually, of moving clips into Premiere now. So we're sort of in a little bit of a transitory phase with that. But for the most part, if we're going to do stuff in After Effects, we would render it out as ProRes. Now, it's worth noting that sometimes if we do an edit in Premiere, and then if we want to do the color grade in After Effects, we will have already given Premiere ProRes clips. So then we can make the timeline then appear in After Effects, and then in After Effects we just render the movie out as one big movie from there. We don't need to go back into Premiere at that point because we already have all of the sequence.
Which we did with this film. Basically, once we brought it into After Effects, after it was all edited, brought it into After Effects, did all the color grading, and then we spit out the one clip, right? And we avoided the whole gamma shift twice. So we spit the whole thing.
Or any other degradation in quality.
And we just added the one clip with the audio, and then we, package it to send it to a client. So you can see, obviously, that even this shot looks slightly nicer than what you could do in something like Premiere or Final Cut. And now I'm gonna open this guy, Speed Grade, which is going to give you, to me this is great. We tried a few things. We tried other programs, all other color grading programs just recently that are more like node-based solutions like DaVinci. And well, we found it to be unnecessary for us, I guess, for our workflow. We thought that the advantage that we have right now is that this already comes with a suite of programs that we already have, right? And then so we tried this guy, and this guy is great in that it works pretty much like in After Effects, and you can have all these layers in here.
And it's got all those windows that we don't know what they are too in here too.
So and it looks impressive. So that's pretty cool. Now, so you can see here that I have the exact same clips in RAW format from the other two that we open in After Effects and in Premiere. The cool thing about this is that in here I can do the color correction and the color grading on separate layers. You can do it also in other programs, but it's going to be a little bit more complicated and less easy to visualize than in here. You literally see there the first layer is CC, right? So I tried basically to make sure that all these clips were consistent and neutral from beginning to end. And I even desaturated some of them, right? To make sure that they belong in the same spectrum there. So the way you do this is very straightforward with this program. I'll turn this off, right? I'll turn this guy off. You have this little icon in here that I have my mouse over. You drag it on top of this clip right there, and it makes an untitled grading clip in there. So we'll do the CG school grade. And again, very simple interface. You have here a primary grade. You can add a secondary grade, which is starting to get cool because now you can actually change the greens if you want to change the greens with more detail. And then you actually have effects also in here. You can add blooms, color match, bleach bypass, effects, you name it. So there's a bunch of effects in here that can be useful once in a while. You can, and I'll go into some of them at some point. Then you can copy and save presets of all your settings in here, and then copy and paste them to all the other clips. You can animate and keyframe all of this grading if you needed to, right? So if you want to delete any of these guys, you literally just grab it from here and get it out of the way, and it's done. So I'll go to the color correction part here, and won't elaborate too much into what we already have talked about with the three-way color corrector and all that stuff, but you can find that it's going to be the exact same thing. You have the three circles in here, right? And in this case, though, you have three circles per the overall color, the shadows, the midtones, and the highlights. In the previous ones, we only had three circles, right? And it was the three, and that's it: shadows, midtones, and highlights. In this one, you have what these video amplifiers basically were doing, right? Where you have the offset, the gamma, and the gain, which is the darks, the medium, and the brights of the shadows, the midtones, and the highlights, and the overall color. As well as that, you can change the input saturation the pivot of the screen, of the colors and all that, the contrast, temperature, final saturation, and you can change this color to in there. So let me show you what we did here on the first clip. So this guy, that's as big as I can make this thing, so I hope you guys can see it well. Primary color correction in the overall. Again, I went with the exact same formula, went to the blue on the offset, I went to the yellow on the gain, and the gamma was changed also a little bit towards the orange. Change the contrast a little bit and add a little bit of saturation in there. And all that we're really doing in here is just adding that extra layer of detail to all the color in this. So in the shadows, I really just modified the gamma a little bit, make it a little warmer because it was too purple. Midtones, all we did here was just change the contrast of the midtones, which are, see this dial right here? So that's that. And in the highlights, I changed the highlights temperature to blue, and because they were a little bit blown out, if you remember on the other comps, there was way too much white on the top left of this frame. I try to recover a little bit of that with bringing the white. You see, I'm burning it in there, and then you can bring it down a little more that way, so it's just not completely white. And then you know that you're going to be adding a bloom to this shot, so you don't want to burn it too much beforehand. So that's that. So then I did a secondary for the green. See that? Cool thing about this is that you can actually make very precise selections of color and add to them with the eyedrop. So you can just select the color and change it. So if I wanted to add another secondary color correction, and I just wanted to affect the yellows, right? You can just hit the yellow button in there, and you can change the temperature of it. You can change the offset and the gain of those two. Same thing here when you do hit shift and move the cursor like in After Effects, it would move the values faster. I don't know if 10 times like they've claimed. 10 times? I don't know. So, but the cool thing about this is that, like I said, you can pick and choose your color. What do you want to change about it, and do it in more detail. So I'll delete this guy in there. Then we added a secondary, the bloom, of which you also have a lot more control of in this program than just adding the bloom and some sliders here and there. So you have your intensity and radius. Right now they're ganged, so meaning that when I move one, all of them move at the same time. But you can go, if for some reason you want to use only the red, the green, or the blue, you can do that. There's a threshold of how much of that, of the image that effect is going to affect, how much it blends with the image. And this one, I actually never move here at the end. So then the cool thing about these two is that it doesn't necessarily have a vignette tool, right? But you can draw masks on this thing, and you can actually track things in here So if you were to be color grading a scene with a person and you wanted to do this crazy, moody scene, and you just wanted to not affect the skin or the face of the person, you could, do a quick mask and animate that mask, or track that, track the face of that person, or track an object that is moving on a helicopter, shot, and affect that in a different way than just with general color correction. So you create a mask. As you can see, I have a mask in there. It's just an oval shape. You literally just hit this button here with the oval shape. It'll immediately put by default, the oval right in the center in there. And this is very intuitive in that the center, when you click and drag on the center, it scales the whole thing. When you click and drag on the edge, it's going to scale only the outside. And so that way you can feather your edges a little more. And same thing with, these guys and the rotation of it. So very straightforward. Turn on the vignette. And for the vignette, only in the overall, all I did was to lower the offset, or the gamma, sorry, of the image to get a little bit of vignetting in there. So if we were to render these same clips from the 3 different programs, you would get the best result out of this guy. For many reasons. Number one, this is, you can tell immediately just by looking at this, just by looking at this image, how this clock shot looks much nicer. There's a lot more detail into it, and the colors are less. You can exaggerate things a little bit more. You can control more the blooms and the vignettings and all those things. It's not just like you're using these plugins that are actually doing the right math, but they do it in a very generic way. So it's like the example that I put of, you do a 3-way color correction, and it's enough. You can make it look like something, but it's not like having the offset, the gamma, and the gain for 4 things: for the overall color, for the shadows, for the midtones, and for the highlights. That to me immediately is, okay, this is far superior, and it's not threatening like other interfaces that you see there. It has all this, crazy stuff in there, right? So just to finish this, see, to me, all these shots look crisper and sharper when we do them in here. To finish, you can see here the fancy graphs in here that we don't know what to do with. We actually know what to look for, right? At the very least, we know that the blue and some of the black is out of range. It's clipping, right? And, is it wrong? Maybe, technically, right? Do you like how your image looks? Yeah, I like the way it looks. So there is this one thing here in here called, let me just add one layer here to the top of this whole thing. And I'm going to extend it all the way to the end. And I'm just going to add a little effect here called legalize NTSC. There you go. So now if you were to broadcast, if you were to export this for broadcast, then you don't have illegal values on it's clipping. So you can see, take a look at the graphs, right? I'm going to turn it on and off. The image, you can't really see anything in the image. It's just the information. But those values would be illegal, right, for the broadcast color space in there. So, and there you go. That's pretty much what we're going to be trying to do in the future at Neoscape, where we're basically, the whole process is going to be, or hopefully we want to keep it linear as long as possible until we get it here. So we're going to be getting the 16-bit EXRs from Max into After Effects and Nuke. Obviously, Nuke is a floating point environment, so it keeps it a 16-bit. We're going to have to be keeping our in After Effects, the cool thing about this is that you can work in 8 bits if you don't want to make your comp, all heavy. But then you can toggle in between 8-bit and 16-bit to start to see, how things are looking, and then you can export it as 16-bit again because it's non-destructive that setting in there. And so we'll export EXR sequences neutral, color corrected, not graded, without vignetting, without any of the fancy special effects in it, export it as EXR sequences, then bring these EXR sequences in here. You can actually bring EXR sequences into this program and grade them, and from this program, speed them for the very first time into a QuickTime that would make it into Premiere. If we need to, because I think that you can also open EXR sequences in Premiere, but we haven't tried that.
And it's been kind of, we're still doing research. I'm trying to remember if EXRs or TIFFs are the ones that kind of work out, but again, we're still
but
kind
ultimately,
of in the mix.
if you do it all the way to here, it's perfectly fine, right? Because you're in the last step of it on editing, and you can edit with offline. You can edit with previews or the After Effects. You can make small previews and work in your edit while you work in parallel on your color correction and your color grading. And once you're ready, you can export, all these clips from here, and you just export all the clips or all the frame sequences, whatever you want to export, and bring them back into your editing suite. Like I said, they just released this month an update to Premiere and SpeedGrade that will allow you to go back and forth in between the two.
And what's great about that is it's a scenario where it's going to keep the SpeedGrade color renderer will be embedded into After Effects. Premiere as a plugin basically. So you do your work in here, and then you go back into.
So when you
Premiere
come back to Premiere, you would see a layer actually
like an effect or that would be on there.
Yeah, hold on. There is actually one in here that has it.
The Lumetri.
So this one, the Lumetri, that is a preset from SpeedGrade. So you'll be able to toggle on and off in here your color grade in your edit too.
We just I know in the past when we were using more Final Cut Pro and they had Apple had bundled the color application in with their Final Cut Studio, and it was all well and good, and they told you that you could do round tripping between Final Cut Pro and color, but there was this weird XML back thing that would change all the names of your clips, and I don't know how many. We're never done working on movies until the end, so to all of a sudden blow all the file names away and stuff and leave that up to some weird process, to have something like this that you can keep all that live, go back into your edit and just toggle it on and off. That's great.
So one cool thing about this program too is how when we were doing in Premiere, you had to go manually back to the previous shot to see what it looked like, and then go to the next one to compare them. In After Effects, you can do a snapshot, and then you can just toggle in between one and the other. In this one, you have this button here where you do 2 shots, and depending where you are, it's going to show you the previous one. Or you can do 3, and it's going to show you, whatever shots you have in there to compare one or the other. You notice that the big ones are because they were 4K footage, and the small ones is because they were 1080 or 720. And that's it. So just before we, let me shut this off, all these programs. You thought I was gonna? Yeah. Save. So I want to show you the latest Neoscape demo reel to summarize the whole thing. You've seen that we've done some simple things we've shared with you. We've shared with you the philosophy of how we do things. For you guys online, I'm gonna copy and paste the Vimeo location of the demo reel. And was it here, Dave, somewhere? Yeah, let me get it. So, marketing, films by project, Neoscape. And so this is basically, we skipped a year or two on doing a demo reel. We were super busy, and this year we finally got to do this guy. So this is a collection of almost 2 years of work, and we're work that we're very proud of, and literally all we share with you in these 3 days, it's what we do and how we achieve this right here. So here we go. Thank you, guys. Well, thank you very much for coming here and hearing us talk all this nonsense. And I hope this encourages everyone to do the best you can with the tools you have.
Great, thank you very much, guys. So I think probably we have a little bit of time for a Q&A. When is some people are leaving early? When? 4 o'clock. 4 o'clock. Okay, so we have a little bit of time here. Okay. Good. So before we jump into the Q&A, first of all, I just wanted to thank all of you for coming from all over the world. This is definitely the most successful CG School event we've done. I was pleasantly surprised to see so many people from so many different countries attend this event. We've done these before, but not quite in this format, and I think it's worked really well. But I really, really want to thank the guys from Neoscape. They've done a terrific job preparing all this content for us. I know it was an enormous amount of work and a lot of sacrifice, evenings and away from families and whatnot. And also for Neoscape for putting us up in their space here for the week. So thank you very much, you guys.
Yep, it was our pleasure. Thank you. Thank you.
So if there's any questions about anything during the week, I mean,
anything you guys might want to
bring the
have,
other guys in.
About the studio. I mean, you can grab Raouf if you have IT questions. Anything.
Well, first of all, thank you very much for breaking us the entire workflow from A to Z with respect to renderings and videos. It's been very, very fruitful and amazing to be here. I have a question, and probably this may call for a CG School too, because it's an open-ended question, but within the wide range of services that you have also the interactive component. And you come from the 3D world. How do you see the present and future of 3D and interactivity coming together. Like nowadays, there are tools that allow for real-time rendering with real-time rendering engines like Unity and so on. Do you use them? Have you planning of using them? Yeah, I'm curious to know. I'm curious to know what your point is or what your position is with respect to that.
Okay. The red ones? Yeah, so we've done some things. I'll let Niels and Rodrigo and then Johnny, can explain. Johnny actually has done some super sweet 3D interiors for a client of ours in Unity. And so what happened with that, Johnny?
Well, we haven't done much else aside from the first test with it, but it's pretty cool. There's no pipeline right now, really, online for how to get stuff from V-Ray format, V-Ray materials and stuff like that into Unity. So that can be a little difficult, but one of the ways I did it was we picked up the software, it's called Flatiron from 3D.io, and that lets you do whole scene baking. So you can take like your V-Ray IES lights and whatnot, and you can bake everything in, say, like 3 or 4 passes. Like I did one pass that was all the architecture, one pass that was all seating, and one pass that was like jewelry and whatnot. And so you get all those maps all into one map each for lighting, and you get it as like your 32-bit EXR for lighting, and you just replace the Unity GI solution with that map, and it works out pretty well. So that one was pretty fun. Did you have any other more specific questions about it, though?
Yeah, with respect to that, we worked around a little bit with Unity from, I don't know, 5 years ago. But the challenge that we've had is that it changes the workflow, especially because once you get into Unity and web requirements, the modeling needs to be completely different. So at that time, importing all the data with the baked information and with the nature of the workflow of our industry, architects and real estate developers, that a project is never done, it really proved to us that it was very difficult at that time. So I don't know if the workflow has been easier nowadays, or if it's easier to export from the actual models that you create the videos and the renderings, or if you still optimize the models in order to work with Unity.
You definitely want to optimize. What I started doing when we were doing this was making our own low poly libraries of things, but you're still going to have to go through and make sure that all the normals are the correct direction, things like that, for all the geometry you have, like architecture-wise. But there are some cool advancements. It looks like Lumia. I don't know if you saw their newest one. It looks pretty sweet, lighting-wise and the materials and whatnot. But it still is time-consuming. And I would probably try and start real-time projects more towards like the end of their design phase, so you're not popping things in and out all the time, because it takes more time.
So just to answer the first part of your question, which is, I think to me, Johnny is sort of one of our R&D gurus, and there's, like I said on day one, there's value there. So it's not necessarily going to be easier. I think that you need to sort of be thinking about what real-time is going to do offered to your clients. And ultimately, it shouldn't be something that is buried in the cost of, because we have the model, you can get a real-time. I mean, there's value in clients having that functionality. I think one of the things that we've been trying to do a lot is integrate our interactive capabilities, which started out as us doing simple kiosks and websites, and we've looked at mobile, and Seth, who is not here right now, but he's he's worked closely with our mobile development team to figure out how to leverage 3D, and ultimately those things become an additional service, an additional offering. And I think that visualization, like for everyone here, if you're not doing it already, you should look at that. You should look at the opportunities that the stuff that you produce has downstream, because ultimately I think all of this stuff is headed in that direction where anything is game, and it's not just a rendering that you're producing. It's a whole suite of things that, speak to each other and become kind of this part of this integrated world. And I think that, we certainly are pushing it that way. And I think all of us together, meaning us and you guys and other visualization companies, need to continue to educate clients as to the possibilities. It shouldn't be just a technology thing. It's Unity is one tool. But it's, don't think of it as technology. Think of it as an opportunity to sort of take visualization to another level, and all of a sudden you're selling things that are no longer just discrete menu items. Does that make sense?
Let me before we go into more questions here. There's a few questions for the guys online. What do you look for a smart artist to hire in your team? Well, we want them to be smart, right? Like Johnny. No, well, look, we ask. It's a great question. We have a lot of people here at Neoscape that are extremely talented, and are people like me and Dave that are not, right? So
Truth comes out. It's called a waveform.
The key though, the one thing that we look for in people is personality and drive. We want people that are passionate about what we do, and that's it, right? You need to be a team player. You need to be a person that has fun, and like what you do, right? Enjoy what you do. Of course, having talent is important, but many of those things can be fostered, and many of those things can be, can be learned. How to do a rendering, you can learn how to do a rendering. You need a certain amount of talent to do a good rendering. But ultimately, I like people that are responsible, that, come to work because they like to come to work. So that's the more important thing. Just be passionate and driven and a fun person.
Rob, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, why did you hire us?
Any other questions?
Yes, hold on.
Oh, sorry.
What was that?
No, he's good.
Okay. The second question is, how much do we charge for a 2-minute video? No. So we don't charge per minute.
They're all free.
Yeah. So don't worry about charging per time.
Nobody pays me in gum.
Yeah, we get paid in gum. What's the export setting for that clip, Dave? I imagine the
export setting for the After Effects clip, or the
I imagine
Like
she's
our- like
talking
our
about
final-
our final
exports?
delivery exports.
Oh,
yeah.
okay, yeah. We will typically, if like for instance, if we're in Final Cut or Premiere, we'll write out a final ProRes movie, and then from there we have a series of, at least on the Mac, we have a series of droplets that are made from compressor settings. So we'll have a standard 1080p delivery, a 720p delivery, and then formats like SD, Web, all H.264, yes. We also have the ability to save out as WMVs, MP4. We're dealing with some newer web, like HTML5, more compliant things
WebM,
like WebM, and we haven't been doing as much of that. But really, when it comes down to it, if a client or another partner of ours comes to us and says, "Can you give us it in that format?" Well, yeah, we can. And then sometimes for the actual playback, a lot of our stuff on the web. Apple TVs get used a lot. If we're doing maybe installs, we actually have a bright signs that we use sometimes if we're doing more like installed like LCD panels that might be looping something.
That's just so that a bright sign is a small computer that can be connected on the
Driving
internet.
our-
That's what
yeah.
driving our reception desk TV in there. It's a small computer with an SD card that plays a video. So it's just a very simple playback device.
And just to sort of talk about in the Adobe world too, like Adobe Media Encoder, would be the equivalent of a compressor on the Apple platform, which also has a whole host of presets for different applications. So you should look up Adobe Media Encoder and how to leverage that for your export needs.
Guys, what about the construction industry right now? America is going on. Can we repeat the question? How is the real estate industry construction? What's your expectations for the future?
I think that's a question for Rob.
Here, get him on mic.
Here, restate the question. And then, introduce yourself since you haven't officially been.
Hi, everybody. I'm Rob. I'm one of Nils' partners. So the question is, what are our expectations moving forward now that we've come out of the recession and we're in a bit of a building boom? And I think we're very optimistic about real estate development. We're seeing a lot of activity, not just nationally and locally, but internationally as well. And so moving forward, we are still always going to be kind of cautiously optimistic based on what happened to our industry a few years ago. But we're seeing tremendous velocity in, for us, first, retail came back very strong a few years ago. Commercial office came back very strong. Right on the heels of that, now residential and big mixed-use development is really very, very strong. So again, we're very optimistic. There are certainly hot spots in the United States that we're seeing a lot of activity in. But those hot spots tend to migrate around the country and around the world with time, and we see it kind of being very positive for the next several years. So, did that address it pretty well? Okay, great.
Anybody? Anything? How about an IT question for Rauf? Yeah. Rauf has plenty of interesting stories if you want to know. Yes.
He came in here and didn't know what rendering was. Now he's an expert.
Although he did say that after sitting through some of this, he's learned some more. So there's plenty.
Are you gonna buy the videos?
Nah.
Are you gonna make discount for me?
Well, Jeff, do you have to ask Jeff?
Are there any other questions over there?
No.
No, you're good? So the question is, where do we see rendering going? And that's a good question. There's a lot, from the sort of, technical standpoint and some of the more, algorithm discussions and things like unbiased rendering and certainly the new V-Ray 3.0 with some of the progressive path tracing rendering technologies. There's a lot of interesting movement, but I think that if you were to sort of take it back and abstract that from a level, the hope, I think, by all the rendering companies, whether or not this is good or bad for us, is that hopefully things will get more simplified. I think as the settings and hemispherical subdivisions and all that stuff starts to become a little more under the hood, then some of that will go away. I don't, we talked briefly about the idea of real time and that type of environment, and I'd like to think that someday things will be that easy and that fast, although from my personal experience in 18 years of Neoscape and 2 or 3 years before that, whatever the capabilities of computers were, there was usually pushing right to the very bleeding edge. And if you could get Carlos, what's your magic number? 20 minutes?
For what?
For a render.
30.
30 minutes for a single frame at 720p or maybe...
The average, that's the average.
So if we shoot for 30 minutes a frame, maybe a little more for full HD. No matter what we seem to have at our disposal, and no matter what we seem to be trying to do, year after year, and maybe it's because we just make things more complicated and we use more geometry and we've gotten more. And I think we actually get a little bit less rigid about trying to make optimizations, because it's always going to be a trade-off, right? You're trying to optimize things to save as much time in the rendering phase, but sometimes optimizing takes so much time that sometimes it's better just to throw it in the farm and let the farm do all of the heavy lifting, even if it's not, going to be the most efficient use of the time. But that's my opinion. Do you guys have anything to add about future rendering?
Well, I was going to say, just to echo on that, is that you really, even with the technological advancements, you just kind of use, that processing power to just make more cool stuff. You sort of achieve a level that you're okay with in terms of render times and whatnot, and then you just kind of make it look that much cooler, and you know that you can't just have it right away. I mean, the 30 minutes a frame, if your computers get beefier, you can still live with that 30 minutes a frame, but you can make it look that much cooler. So
It's still gonna be 30 minutes with a faster computer at full HD.
Yeah, and also I would say that one
4K, yeah.
it's gonna go higher res.
2 hours.
The other thing that's been happening a lot for us over the last 5 years is migrating some of the 3D capabilities out of the pure 3D environment. So by being able to do some work in After Effects in 3D, and now using Nuke and concept like camera projection, which is an ancient, I mean, from our standpoint, an ancient technique. It goes back to the mid 90s. But using ideas like camera projection in compositing applications like Nuke, there's going to be circumstances where you don't have some of the painful rendering cycles and re-rendering.
But the noisy trees.
Or the noisy trees. Yeah, I mean, one thing that is just a fundamental, just physical limitation of the way renderers work is that when you have very fine geometry and a very long distance, the idea of tree leaves that are built as proxies in a giant multi-scatter or forest pack pro scattered environment, individual leaves are so small that a single pixel might represent a 20 square foot area, and as it samples, it always does that. I'm sure that many people have done the skyscraper with the balcony railings, and as you pan across the scene, the renderings, they sparkle because they literally go in and out of the samples because you just can't subsample to the level of finding every last piece of geometry inside a pixel. And so that kind of thing is really it's just a fundamental CG problem. Maybe they'll be solving them. I know that things like RenderMan have a lot of interesting shortcuts for trying to optimize scenes for that kind of level of detail problems that occur.
And deep compositing.
Deep compositing, and some of these new map types that exists, like, essentially imagine, normal maps to the nth degree where you embed a lot of intelligence into a single map, and make it procedural. But there's a lot of exciting things happening, and I think there always will be. I don't think we're ever finding that limit. No, and also I would say that also goes along the terms when I mentioned the simplicity of it. People have on very many occasions sort of predicted the demise of our industry, but it doesn't ever seem to come true. So we'll see. Here we got one question.
Yeah. I would say 15 years ago or 20 years ago, the questions were always with respect to watercolors versus renderings or other different methods of representation versus renderings. Back in the day, there was also the advantage that there were very few companies producing renderings, and architects always engaged with them. Nowadays, the technologies are simpler to use, more cost-effective. Architects can create some decent renderings with Revit and so on. But still, you still work with architects. Has it changed the way that you see renderings, and has it affected the fact that maybe the rendering is not only trying to produce hyper-realistic images, but more a tonality, a mood? Or what's your position to that?
I think I have a very strong opinion on renderings these days. Back when it was very easy to impress anyone with anything, right? You can just do a 3D rendering and render it, and they wouldn't even complain about the chairs. They were just amazed to the fact that you can actually visualize the space. And it was like, and it was great. But things changed right through the years, that people started to get this like shock of like, oh, well, watercolor is better, or or pencil or a pen or whatever method of rendering, and they were like all against the 3D and all that stuff. I think that we reach a point where software is no longer, what do you use, Mental Ray or V-Ray or Max or Maya? It doesn't matter. It's like asking what kind of pen you use to write, right now, I think that renderings, and in particular 3D renderings, have reached the point where it's art again. doing a rendering before 3D, it was art. It was considered art. It was considered, very talented people would do watercolors and all sorts of architectural renderings. These days, to me, that's what it is. People are paying attention to what's important again, and not whether you were using a lens flare or whatever plugin you were using. Doesn't matter. And that's why, when we get into the whole conversation of, my rendering took 80 hours to render, where you're a moron, right? You don't need 80 hours to render that and make it look good. You need to concentrate on what's on the purpose of what the rendering is. And to Rodrigo's point of, you need to find, you need to use the tools that you have at hand to provide your client with a solution to a real problem. And it's just not just, I want 5 renderings and an animation. Really? So it's not that anymore. I think that you need to move forward and beyond that.
So think of it as you're not selling renderings. That's not, I think if you ask anyone here, that's not what we want to be selling. A rendering is a tool. And I think what I said before, is very much the way that we want to be thinking as a company. And I think we'd like our peers to sort of think that way. It's to not commoditize what we do. It is art. It's commercial art. I mean, obviously, it needs to serve a purpose. And I think for us, technology hurts my brain. So I don't think of it in terms of subsampling or deep compositing like Nils does. That's why Nils works here, is so I can go ask him what deep compositing is. 32-bit, 16-bit. I mean, all those things obviously are great because they allow us to do what we do, and that's all very important. But ultimately, I think it's as important to think about what it is ultimately that you're doing for the people that you work for or that you work with, and that's where thinking ahead yourself, needs to come into play. It's like, I don't, 15 years ago, we didn't want to just be doing renderings. Like when I joined Neoscape, we wanted to do films, not walkthroughs. To some people, it's the same thing, but there's a very different value proposition, and there's a very different goal. There's a very different standard. All of a sudden, you're telling stories that are going to help architects and clients sell their spaces, lease their spaces, get their projects approved. That's a lot more valuable to them than a rendering. That's why, we don't compete with companies that are very good at producing things quickly. And some of them produce great work. That's fine. That's not our place. And I think that you just always need to continue evolving, because 2 years from now, the answer to your question is going to be completely different. There's going to be other completely different set of circumstances that come into play. We are looking into ways of, forget about the screen. How can you leverage visualization in environments using projections, and all of a sudden it's a 3D experience or a 4D experience or 5D. So, that's the way we should be thinking, because otherwise, you will continue to do renderings, and then
just invented 5D.
There's no sort of evolution. So, anyway, I'll get off my soapbox now.
So on a similar note, so years ago there were walkthroughs, right? And now you led the way into storytelling for architectural visualization, right? 5 years ago or 7 years ago, and now it's with kind of like moving infographics or the motion graphics that you're showing to get people to understand concepts and understand the buildings, kind of like the work for Autodesk that has been done. What are the ideas for next? I mean, what do you see that our clients expecting for the next 10 years of film? What do they look like?
I don't know, man. I would lie if I tell you, if I try to be, an oracle and tell you what's going to happen. What I can tell you though is that all the things that we've done are in response to the same question we ask ourselves every day. It's how do we make this better, and how do we address our clients' needs in a creative way with the tools we have. So through the years of battling the whole walkthrough versus a high concept film, we were asked to, can you just put a text in here, and this numbering here, and this other thing in here, and then we find ourselves not really. We had to learn to understand where they come from. These people obviously are in that industry and are good at what they do because they know what they're doing, and you need to understand that. So in learning how they operate and how they for many years have been selling their product, you inform yourself and you are like, okay, maybe they know what they're talking about. And so you use the tools that you have at hand and just use them creatively and try to please them. I mean, they're paying you to do that. They're paying you to create a tool that will enable them to sell. And sometimes you can steer them in a different direction, right? Sometimes they come to you asking for help, like you're the professional, you've been doing this for the longest time, and they maybe haven't done it. But then there's, like I said the other day, you have clients that are very savvy, that they know what they're doing, that have done this 100 times, and that they're expecting a lot of you. So when we sit down and we think about these things, is when we challenge ourselves to, have Dave do something like the motion graphics and put it on him.
I'd like to, everything that Carlos has said is very true, but on like a more pragmatic and sort of boring level, a lot of what we've done, I think Dave said it in I saw it in his notes at least, something about borrowing. There is a lot of borrowing that goes on, and there's a lot of media out there, and they're doing cool stuff on TV and in the movies and other places, and so a lot of it is just staying current with the current sort of trends and things that people like, but then also a lot of it is in response to what clients ask for. A lot of, we've had clients recently sending us, as Rodrigo mentioned, like some really cool projection type interactive things, and there are certainly clients who really want to find a way to differentiate themselves and make themselves different, and we want to encourage that. But then we also have clients that want the same thing that we provided for them 5 years ago, just a newer version, or it's got new graphics or something, but it's not necessarily going to reinvent the wheel. But a lot of times that's what's appropriate for that market and that group and that circumstance. And so we try to, if someone really came to us and was dying to have us do a walkthrough of a hospital to show people how you got from the lobby all the way to the, whatever unit, we would try our very best to talk them out of it. And we most likely wouldn't take it simply by the sheer nature that, in my opinion, any of those type of jobs end up being so hard. If you ever agree to something that you truly fundamentally disagree with the approach of, you're going to end up just never feeling satisfied, even if you could get the client to eventually be satisfied. And plus, it's so unreasonably expensive to do something that's really the wrong answer. But people still come to us and ask us for that same kind of thing, and we, try to be polite or diplomatic. But in a lot of cases, they're coming to us and they want something that's similar to what we've already done, and we're not necessarily going to be, as Rodrigo said, it's commercial art, so we're not here to just only sort of break new ground and be innovative. We sometimes have to, pay the bills and keep the lights on and keep everything going. So I think that does that sort of make sense? Again, that's a more practical sort of approach that, keep an eye out on movies and films and TV and out on the internet, and what artists and what interactive, in immersive environment, type people, and everything that's just being, I would say that depending on, when you would take a sample, about 10% of the emails that go to our group email here is like, hey, look at this cool thing, and it's, probably 2 years ago it was the stop motion looking time lapses where people had done the tote shifts thing, and we've certainly seen more than our fair share of real life build type animations, and we've Northern Lights and crazy cam things and the hexacopter stuff, and there's a lot of cool stuff going on, and so we just try to keep aware of some of the coolest, newest things, and simply see if a lot of times it's just white noise and people look at a cool video and get lost and then go back to their work after 5 minutes, or it becomes something that we might pursue and put into a treatment for a future idea or a movie.
I have a quick question actually for the group. So how many of you guys are architects? Okay. And how many of you guys still design? Okay. So think about the work that you do. So you're producing imagery, right? Visuals for people that they're going to use to market whatever. At least I assume a lot of you or most of you do that. So think about using visualization as a way to to use visualization spatially. You know, it's like, what can I do with the stuff that I'm producing to actually generate environments or generate the experience? And it's a lot of it is rendering. A lot of it applies, you know, a lot of these same techniques apply the same way. It's just thinking about it in a different way. And I think, you know, a couple of us were at a conference last week in New York about immersive environments, and half the people that spoke were architects, the other half were artists or whatever. A lot of them were using renderings to inform the design process, to activate environments. Sometimes they were using the same materials. Some of them were using it to, you know, generate infographics about data studies that they were selling to the government. So, I mean, it's all the same stuff. It's just bits of data, producing a picture, and then somehow you leverage that picture. So, like, that's the stuff that I think is exciting. And Nils is right. You do need to pay the bills so that you can spend time thinking about these things. But those things ultimately are the ones that we continue. I mean, they're painful a lot of times because the first time you do it, you have no idea what the hell's going on. But I think a lot of designers are going in that direction anyway. There's a lot of architects that are doing like things that are complete hybrids and combinations of things. And ultimately, I think, you know, one of the things that drives us is how do people experience the stuff that we produce? You know, whether it's in a book, on a wall, up on a screen, in motion. That kind of stuff is exciting. And I think in terms of the future, that's one of the places where there's huge opportunities to blur the lines, you know, because all of a sudden you as an architect and visualization artist have way more tools at your disposal that you can use to engage people in. And then there's that, you know, debate about what is an architect really. You know, it's like you're a designer, right? And you design in 3 dimensions. So, I mean, I think that for me is the stuff that excites me. It's the stuff that I try to excite people like Johnny with. And the real-time stuff that he does is that's the realm. You know, it's people want to experience something. And, you know, 3D movies, right? They're gimmicky, but the ones that are good are really good. And why are they good? Because they sort of bring you into this world. And I think as architects, you know, you have that opportunity to leverage those visuals to do that.
In the past couple of years, there's been a lot of discussion about and controversy about the future of animation, visual effects. Unfortunately, we've had experiences where in Toronto, in London, there's been big name companies that have been going down. Neoscape is one of the largest companies in the CG architectural field. How do you see the future, and what type of risks do you think that future has, and what is your recommendation for other companies that want to grow but stay in business and still be working on those dreams and those ideals that we have?
You. And we talked about this a little bit earlier today. It's, you know, for us, we're not growing because we want to be a big company. You know, we grow when there are opportunities to grow. We grow somewhat conservatively. You know, we were a 3-person company for a year and a half, and then we hired our first person, and we were a 4-person company probably for the next year. And so, you know, we've grown also by adding services. So we have a core of 3D expertise in motion graphics and film, and now we have iPad development and web development, and we have marketing and sales to support all of it. And so we grow conservatively, and we look at other industries. So we do not just architecture and real estate, we do corporate work as well, but we're not going out on a limb and trying to do corporate work that isn't in our wheelhouse. So it's still motion graphics and storytelling through 3D and animation and rendering. And there's a lot of good potential. I mean, everybody in this room has watched TV commercials, and you know you could do the same thing. You could probably come up with the idea that's just as creative and execute it. And so there are avenues that we can all pursue, but those markets, as you point out, are really cutthroat. And so for us, knowing the environment that we're in of architectural visualization primarily, it's you know who the players are and you know how to compete. And when you get outside of that comfort zone, whether it be gaming or broadcast or filmmaking, it's a different world. And so I'm not saying don't do it, but do it with the knowledge that it's going to be difficult and ultimately maybe worth it. But everything seems easy until you actually try to do it. And we dabbled with doing games and cutscene animations, and it's just, in terms of having a stable environment to have employees that you can pay on a regular basis, it wasn't the right fit for us. It was too unstable, and I think visual effects is going through that now, where Digital Domain and these other big studios, like, how can they go out of business when they're making $100+ million films? And it's it's not something that we're prepared to get into, but it just shows you that it's not always as good as it seems, even though the work is very sexy and really compelling to look at. It's very hard to be profitable doing it. So I think as an industry, architectural visualization is pretty stable. And so, we use it as a platform to build off of, but again, conservatively and where it makes sense. So the branding and interactive makes sense for us. So
I think one thing that I want to add to is that you should think about it. Think about sustainable, like a sustainable business model. The VFX industry is not a sustainable business model, clearly. We look for opportunities to offer a career path for people. So it's not just a stopping point. Oh, I'm going to work on this film and I'm going to do, I'm going to work on this shot for the next six months. I know people who do that, and a lot of us know people who do that. It's ultimately it's not fulfilling work in the long term. So if you want to grow, then you need to think about how you can offer those kinds of opportunities to younger artists, and we do. I mean, we spent a lot of time here thinking about career paths, like how do we map out. A lot of us that have been here a while made it up as we went along, and now there's people coming out of school that have an expectation and they're looking for a career, and it's our responsibility to figure that out and make it sustainable so that it's not just there's a place to grow here. We don't, like I said, we don't want people that are going to be here for a couple of months or a year doing one project and then gone. So think about it that way, I think, because ultimately that's, I think, where the failure of the VFX industry in a large extent lies, is that it's the Hollywood model, right? Of like, I need to make money on this one thing, and it's very narrow-minded and short-sighted.
I'd like to hear your comments on global competition. Now, in this room, we have several countries here. I've had a number of clients who love to retort to me, well, David, there's somebody over in such and such on the other side of the planet that will do this for 1/6 of your price. I'd just like to hear your general comments about how you feel that will go. My inclination is to think that, well, one day it's all going to even out everywhere, but I'd like to hear your comments on that.
I mean, I think we all experience the same phenomenon, and almost on a daily basis, where we're competing for work, and it is very competitive, and there's almost always, there's a firm that's going to do what you want $5,000 for, they're going to do it for $1,000 or $500, and ultimately we can't compete on a commodity basis. So we just say, well, good luck. You go ahead, and it might work out really good for you, and it might not. And there was actually, during the downturn, we saw kind of a backlash against outsourcing happen, and we started doing more and more work for architects, where before the downturn, most of our clients were developers. And architects were using us strategically to gain an edge to get work, because it was so competitive for them to get work that they felt they had a better chance to use a more seasoned, top-tier company that's going to offer a level of client service and professionalism that they weren't getting. When you're flush with work and it's easy to get work, you can suffer through mediocre renderings or bad client service. But when things are really tight and when things are really important, that's when you need to go to a tried and true, professional provider. And I think there are tiers of providers out there, and regardless of where they are, there are people that offer a super cheap, super fast, maybe okay, maybe poor rendering options for people, and sometimes that's okay. We just take that out of the equation. If that's if that's the playing field they're going to put before us to compete with, then we're just going to say,
Because it's
sorry.
It's to Rodrigo's point. It's the value of what you sell, and not you're not selling apples. Well, this apple is $5, right? Or this rendering is all renderings cost this much around the world. Well, then go. It's not like that. It's what Rodrigo and all the creative people at Neoscape have been trying to do every day is what is that added value that we give to our clients, and it's all in response to our clients' needs.
And probably everybody in this room has had many opportunities where you're given something to render and you actually have to design it too. And I know a lot of you are architects, but sometimes when you're working for developers, you're designing the space, whether it's an interior, an exterior, retail, and there's a value in that. And that's why a lot of our employees have an architecture background, or at least are smart enough to do their research and know how to represent a brand in a space. And there's a value to that that goes way beyond, just building a 3D model, texturing it, lighting it, and hitting render. That's what they're paying extra for, is that expertise and the knowledge to convince them to do the right views and to represent the spaces appropriately. And that kind of virtual design build should have a premium on it. And for clients that understand, it's been really interesting for us because we have clients who tell us, we need to design a store in Times Square for this particular tenant, and we do it. We make it up, and it looks credible and looks beautiful, and they sign a lease, and then they hire an architect to build what we rendered. And it's part of that's kind of cool. Architects in the audience may be saying, "Oh, that sucks," but it's a reality that visualization is very powerful and it's strategic, and so they can get better designs. They can be a more effective business by using a viz company strategically instead of saying, "Oh, we need rendering, so find a renderer and check it off the list as being something that's done for the job." So
I would also add one quick thing. Think about what makes you different, and probably here in the room, there's a lot of us that maybe there aren't that many differences, right? But we spend a lot of time selling not just our work, previous work that we can use to sell people more work, but we sell our process. We sell how we do things. We sell how we think. We just launched a new website, and a huge part of the effort went into finding ways to show people a little bit of what goes into, things that may seem simple, but in fact they're complicated. And it's a long battle, right? But I think if you commit to that, then over time, I'd like to think that the payoff is that people will start to. A lot of people may say, "Well, I don't need that value. I don't need to buy into your process." Some people hire us after they've worked with firms that do cheap renderings because the cheap renderings make sense. They're quickly produced and they're part of a process. And then they come to us afterwards when they need something that's more polished or something that's part of a campaign, and that's fine. But I mean, it took years, and we still struggle with it a little bit. But think about what makes you different and try to promote those things. Don't just promote your renderings or your animations.
One thing that I'd like to also add is that, and this may be a very cynical sort of approach to it, but a lot of times if you've got a client or just if you know someone and the most important thing to them is just that one little number at the bottom of the page, they're making their decisions based on that, which indicates a lot of how they're going to be as a client. And so in some cases, they're going to be some of the hardest people to work with. And certainly, in our experience, and this goes way back, if we, again, being cynical, if we would take something that we would consider sort of like, all right, we need to do this because this is the price that we need to be competitive, we need to get this work. You almost enter that relationship with already one sort of big, giant red flag against, you end up feeling resentful about the project. They, even if you were to explain to someone that, all right, we're doing something and we're doing this, understanding that it's going to have to be, a little bit faster or a little bit cheaper or a little bit, cut scope. Nobody ever remembers that when they're getting towards the end. They want the best all the time, no matter what. And so there is no, we used to have a joke about the quality knob. Like, all right, just turn the quality knob down and get this thing done. But there is no, there is no quality knob. There's only just the Neoscape quality, at least for us, and I'm sure it's true for a lot of you. You have one level of expectation, and you want to hit that level every single time, regardless of it's someone paying a super premium or someone who you may be doing a deal with. We did a project recently where it's our 4th or 5th year doing work for this big United Way luncheon for the real estate community, and our donation to the community is to do this video. And this video has gotten to be considerable effort over the years. And so we finally finished it. Now this is something that we are not getting paid for, but we don't really have an opportunity to say, all right guys, I know that, you're falling in love with this and you want the client to be happy, but if we're not getting paid for it, you got to stop now. And we still have to do it to our own, so that we feel like we're providing that level of service. So, like I said, it may be cynical, but maybe some of the clients that are using that as a negotiating tactic are already not the best, the ones that you're trying to pursue the most in the end, because of what they're going to be like as clients.
So we have some online questions. One of them is if we can share some of the scripts. We will share some of the scripts that we wrote at Neoscape, like we said originally.
Yep.
Particularly scripts that Niels and Matt have written. We obviously can, and Seth, we can share with you. That's not a problem. You can use them all the time. But we can't give them to you right now. We have to package all this information, give it to CG School, and then they will share them with you. So we'll do the best we can to give them to you as soon as possible.
I can quickly answer this.
So there's another question.
So there's another question, and I'll answer this real quick because it's very specific and kind of off topic. What tools or software do we use for interactive applications? And there's a number of them. I mean, there's an Apple Developers Toolkit. I mean, we're a certified Apple developer, so our development team works with that toolkit and some associated tools and emulators. There's obviously the Adobe tools, Dreamweaver and Flash, which we tend not to like to use too much because it's limited. And then HTML5, jQuery, and a lot of things. So this is obviously an online question, but if any of you guys have questions, we can offline kind of chat with our interactive team, part of which is deep in the throngs of a huge deadline. So it may be a short conversation, but hopefully that at least answers. Hopefully, that answers the online part of the conversation. And there's a million tools depending on what exactly you're doing an interactive for.
The virtual design component, or when you have a chance to produce all the design because there's none, and it's only about and you have to produce a video where it's all about the retail space that doesn't exist. Is this something that you charge as a premium, or you embed on your overhead, or?
I mean, typically it has a premium on it. It's not a set premium like a rendering is $5,000. If it's virtual design build, it's $7,500. It's not as simple as that. We kind of carefully look at what we need to create. We'll do some concepting for it, quickly get them to buy into a direction, and then we execute it. So we are looking at things as a level of effort, and we're typically charging lump sum, and the schedule is going to also dictate that. Many of these, for retail, it tends to be a very compressed schedule, so that already escalates the price a little bit. So, but yeah, it's definitely, it deserves a premium because it's a special skill that the artists have, who can listen to what a client needs and then project it into a 3D space and make it credible and make it beautiful and do it very quickly and allow them to go out and have a very targeted conversation with that particular retailer. So, and clients that get that really get it, and they value it, and they don't mind paying it. So yeah, jack the price up if you can, and when they start turning you down, you've hit about the right price. So
that's hard to do for the in-house guys.
Yeah, it's hard to do for the in-house guys. Yeah.
So we saw that you have some projects overseas in the Middle East and whatnot, but most of the projects are in Boston and New York, where you have offices, right?
Mm-hmm.
So can you talk about the value of being part of the community, and is there any preference for, because most of the work can be done remotely, you would think,
yeah.
But is there any value on being part of the community that you work for?
Yeah, I think absolutely 100%. That being said, we do a lot of work remotely. All the stuff we do in the Middle East, or most of it, we don't go there and interact with those clients. They may have a U.S. counterpart, an architect, or somebody we're dealing with. And there's multiple communities that we feel it's important to be part of. This is one of them. the community of our peer companies, and then there are the communities that we work in. So nothing beats a face-to-face meeting with a client. Skype, any of that, GoToMeeting, that stuff's bullshit compared to being face-to-face. I mean, it really is. You can't have as meaningful a conversation with somebody unless you're in the same room and you're reading body language and you're able to adapt and really respond, in the moment to how the conversation's going and really demonstrate your leadership and vision. And so, that being said, it's almost impossible to do every meeting in person. So even when we're working locally, we use those electronic tools, email and Skype and everything else. But being part of the community is also important in terms of building relationships. We're a relationship company, and I know, talking to Jose, it's all relationships. We're not advertising. We don't do banner ads and AdWords and all that stuff to try to get work. So if you type in 3D renderings, 3drendering.com will show up, and Neoscape probably won't, because we don't get business by people Googling us. We get business because people see our work and they find out who did it, and then we start a relationship, and hopefully it's a long-lasting relationship. So I think being part of the community is really important. Also, we have an opportunity to help developers and architects bring better projects into the neighborhoods and cities that we live and work in. So it's important to be active and be known in the real estate and development communities, the architectural communities, and be seen as a real partner and not a vendor. So I think it's important, and we encourage all of our people to be active in, industry type stuff too. Become an expert in the industry and be active we host the AUGA meetings here, and it's just a way to help our employees build confidence and learn how to present and share ideas with people. But it also sets us up as kind of a guru type company that people can go to for answers, and we're open. Obviously, we're open about how we do stuff, why we do it that way, and we'll share pretty much anything with people when it comes to how we do stuff. And it's worked well for us, and again, that's all part of building a community. So,
and for a practical reason, for being local, it's great when especially on the film team when we work on a movie. It's like, this could really use some B-roll. I'll be back after lunch. I'm going to grab the DSLR and shoot down on the T and set up in, Boston Common or down there in the Seaport and just shoot around for a couple hours, get what you need, and come back. The opportunity to be able to do that is unbelievable. Other places would have to hire a shooter, a local shooter, and have to take a couple of days to find the right guy and get a contract, whatever. We're back and we have that shot in the movie before the day's over. It's a great thing to be able to do. Anybody? The one in the back there.
Hi. Hi. I would like to know about your team. Sorry for my English. I don't speak very well. I would like to know how do your team able to do high-end presentations with some new expectations of the clients? Do you have any kind of program of training or something to do to keep the team?
Training,
Yes.
We don't have any formal training. I think that
This is as formal as it's ever been.
but there is a plan.
Yeah,
There is a
Sink or
plan.
swim?
The plan is, and the way we operate is we have teams of people with different levels of experience, right? And we have senior artists work with junior artists that know, that have been with us for a while. And that is the training. Working is the training. Getting and learning from your peers is the training. We try to have informal sessions in which we, for when we review renderings, for example, internally, we can talk about these things, and that's the opportunities you have to teach, younger artists. The things that you have learned through time, whether it's, the things that Dan spoke about and Johnny spoke about with materials and lighting and composition and photography and all those things. It is, my personal opinion that that's the way to go. It's like, I keep saying, we tend to dive headfirst on things around here. Sometimes we hit pretty hard, sometimes we don't.
Thank you.
Yeah. So when opportunities like this one come up, to hold these kinds of events, and I mean, obviously it's great. I mean, like Rob mentioned, the community that we're part of, like this community is a very important part of what we do. But it's also an opportunity for us to do that, there's a lot of people that have been here maybe a few months, and doing events like this allows us to document things and allows them to speak about it, whereas maybe they were uncomfortable speaking about it before. But I mean, all these guys here and gals, I mean, they're experts, just like you guys are experts. So, I mean, I think talking about it and being part of a community and giving back to the community and trying to educate other people, that's the best way to document and I guess grow. And it's all, like Carlos said, we don't have like a manual here about what it's like to be at Neoscape, but it just, none of us, we don't have like a week-long training session that goes along with the do's and the don'ts. All of it just happens by organically. And then when opportunities like this come up, we actually officialize a lot of it, and we document it, and we give it back to you guys. And we always look for those opportunities that other people put forward too. So there's no secret to it. It's not magic. It happens. Sometimes we have to force it to happen. But I think it's important to get involved, to surround yourself and talk about what you do.
I'll add one quick point, and that is that many of the people that work here, and I'm sure that as everyone in this audience and online they share a passion for this media, and nobody would be here if that weren't true. And so a lot of times, we've said it since we started the company, a lot of the guys that we want to have work here would be doing this if they were not in this industry. They would be going home and doing it. And I know that certainly some of these guys are guilty of going home and still doing more research and more, looking at more software and learning about new techniques and banging their head against new stuff and on the train and, doing, copying some technique. And so, that's sort of a cultural thing rather than formal. It's sort of, we encourage people to sort of just to keep pursuing their art on their own. I think the photography is something that we encourage everybody to keep learning more about, and because photography and composition are a lot of, they have so many cross purposes with what we do. So everybody can always get better, and everyone, we're some of us are getting a little gray and a little old, but we're still trying to learn, and we're still trying to find something interesting and new, and something to find, to keep things interesting. So that's part of, I think, the culture that we encourage everybody to have. And I think that is probably, something that everyone in this audience and watching these videos probably share as well. I hope they do.
He's being modest. Every time we have a problem, he solves it.
So my question is about life and work balance. So we all been there, right? So we work crazy hours, we're obsessed with detail, and we go on the train, reading that article about some new technique and doing whatever at home. And we all grow and we have families and kids, and we, how do you manage more for the leadership team? How do you keep your team your depression and happiness levels balanced? And I mean, growing beards help. I see that all the guys have one.
We've had the beards since day one. They just get
Just
gray.
the new guys don't have, so probably.
I mean, we've actually found that as people have matured, ourselves included, and gotten married and have families, it ultimately makes them much better, more responsible employees. And it is definitely about having a balance. But when you have a family, and that's super important, you've got kids and everything else, you work a lot more efficiently. Where when we were starting out, we just, excuse my language, just fucked off half the time because we didn't have enough work, and so we just keep working and just keep trying stuff. And when you have more important priorities and you're trying to balance life and work, you get a little smarter about how you work. And at the same time, we've got enough experience to motivate the younger people, and we do lean on them a lot. You know, there's a lot of hours, and there's weekends that they give up, and you try to make an environment that you can reward them both through recognition, whether it's just something where you're kind of thanking them, or whether it's monetary or whatever it is. We've all been there, we've done it, we continue to do it. If you're out doing sales or whatever you're doing, you're working really hard, and you're trying to find that proper balance, and at the same time, motivating the younger people and getting them up to speed and ingrained. I like to see when we have teams of people, and often if there's a challenge and there's a team staying late and they're trying to figure it out together, instead of a solitary person banging their head against the wall all night trying to wonder why this something's not rendering. Or but again, it's passionate people that
yeah. So
that work
one
hard.
in terms of managing that the 3D team, me and Rodrigo in particular, as well as them, started doing renderings, and then we had a family and all that. And when we didn't have family, it was easy to just call the wife and say, "Don't wait for me like in 3 days, right?" And that's fine. But we obviously, it's something that you can get tired of. And so one of our main goals as a production team has been to think of ways of not needing to do that. And when a situation like that happens, and then maybe Johnny has a problem, and then Danny's going to stay to figure it out, because it's going to take him 2 hours, it's going to take him 1 hour, to figure it out. And so we try to encourage that a lot, that to help each other out, and know that there are different types of there's different generations that can accomplish different things, and just work as a team.
There have also been probably our biggest breakthroughs have happened, when we're pulling all-nighters, or when we're doing, pulling crazy hours, because it makes you think differently about what you're doing. You have to figure something out, and so we've made a lot of breakthroughs. And also as a company, there's a lot of bonding that happens when you've got 20 people working overnight or throughout a weekend, and they're getting to know each other on a much different level than just 9 to 5. For good or for bad.
Hygiene habits and everything.
But it you're in it together, and you're in the trenches together, and that's an important quality as a company to have, is to know that you've got people who, when the shit hits the fan and we need to step up and do something, that you've got people raising their hand and saying, I'll do it, I'll help, I can figure it out. And so managing that is a combination of mentoring people and showing them the right way to respond and the right way to handle a situation, and trusting that people kind of know what to do to get the job done. And so it's not, it's more, here's what needs to get done by this time, figure out how to get it done. And we want our teams to self-police and know, geez, there's too much work to get done in 40 hours. We need to work a little late. So team, let's figure out a plan. When can we get this done? And so, but it takes a lot of trust, from our perspective to do that. And it's hard for people to kind of get into that mode, but ultimately it's the best way we've found to help manage the sometimes huge volumes of work. So
I'll give you one quick answer. I think you have to, particularly if you have junior people, you have to know when to let go. Like, that was one of the hardest things for me, I know, is I started doing renderings, and now when I do renderings, I scare myself, because I'm like, I shouldn't be doing this. So you have to know when, and that requires a lot of trust. And so trust requires that you bring in people that are really talented. I mean, I personally rely on people that are fresh out of school or are just started to do this, because they have no fear. I have fear of, like, client's not gonna like this, they don't have enough money. Like, Johnny has no fear. So I go to him because I'm like, I sort of, you live vicariously through it, and that's just a fact. And you have to let go. You have to let go of whatever it is that you were doing, and then find other ways to channel your energy, including spending more time with your family or whatever it is.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that I remember when I started here, basically after... Yeah, can I? Okay, sorry. I never use this, I don't know. So yeah, it was basically 3 months or something, and I came to Niels and said, "Hey, I need a day off." I was like, "Why? What's going on?" I'm gonna be a father. And the first thing he told me that, "Oh, don't worry, go take care of your family first." I think that's one of the important things, and I respect that. And well, and it's not only me. We work here and we love this company just because of this small stuff. It's like small, right? Go and take care of your family, but it means a lot. So.
I just have a couple of administrative type questions. One is, who writes the proposals? Is it one person for the company this big? Is it multiple? And then I'll ask the second question.
Johnny pretty much does everything.
Good money, you like it.
We're about to change the name to Johnny-scape, so stay tuned for our rebranding. So we have a team of business development people, three salespeople, and 2 people in marketing, and it's a joint effort between creative, sales, and marketing to put together the proposal. So the best way to write a good proposal is to have the creative people involved from day one, meeting with the client, understanding their needs, and then let the salespeople handle pricing and negotiation and kind of packaging the proposal up, and the marketing people can make it look really great. And so it's a combination, and certain types of projects are easy, and you bang them out in half an hour if it's just a couple
Depending
renderings.
on the challenge, there's proposals that require Matt's expertise, Dan's expertise, Dave's expertise. So before we even do a proposal, or Johnny or anyone, we bring in Vasily, because we know more or less what the challenge is going to be. So we bring the people that know, that are more familiar with that stuff, so that they can input their opinion, and that's going to inform the marketing team and the sales team into how to approach this in terms of budgeting and things like that.
Yeah. And we also, as we're getting into more kind of campaign-centric work, we've got clients who are paying us a small stipend up front to do spec work and come in and pitch, spec creative, which sometimes we're putting spec creative in our proposals for films and things like that, but we're usually not producing, examples for them that are specific to their project. It's using past work that we've done to illustrate something, but we might do a creative write-up. And so, it varies in terms of level of effort. Sometimes it takes us weeks to put together a proposal for big jobs, and other times you're kind of cranking out the easy stuff. And I think,
remember to change the name on all
yeah, and we track, like hit rate and all that stuff. And last year we wrote something like 400 proposals or something like that, of varying sizes, and I forget what the exact hit rate was, but we do track it, and it's important to understand, what works and what doesn't, and how to adapt moving forward.
And one other question, staff meetings, with personnel, do you have them? Do you have them on a company-wide basis? Do you have on a project-specific basis to kind of incentivize everybody, get everybody going on the same project?
We do them monthly in this space. Rodrigo and Carlos, for the most part, run them. We connect through Skype and with our New York office, so we're all doing it together. And it's, sometimes it's housekeeping stuff. It's IT, it's HR, it's introducing new people to the company, and then often it's walking through projects and getting the people that worked on those projects to come up and talk about the challenges of that project, how they solve them. And so it becomes a bit of a project showcase, but it's a lessons learned, and sometimes the lesson's not a good one. So, but that's as important to share with people as the successful projects.
So when you're starting up a project, is it kind of like being in the schoolyard picking teams? I want this person, that person, or what's the process for a project startup and staffing that project?
Rodrigo and Carlos might be able to add a little bit to that, but they know exactly how busy each person is and what they're working on, and where we might have some flexibility in moving people around. And so we'll generally know, there's a couple of things that govern it. There are people who have the right skill set for whatever the project is. So if it's a branding, interactive, viz, we know we're going to have a big team that's hitting all the departments. And when it's a viz team, sometimes there is this team is really great at this type of visualization. Or if it's a real time, Johnny's going to be involved. And so we look at it a couple of ways. And it's not just who's available. It's who's the best person for the job. Are they available? Can we make them available? Can we shuffle things around? And so it's a little bit of this and that.
So staff meetings are also an opportunity for us to going back to your question, where we actually have people present back work that they did. So, you know, a lot of what you see here are things that we've shown at staff meetings. You know, it's like tips and tricks. And our staff meetings are attended by a lot of different people in the entire company, right? So a lot of people may not care about how you texture map something. So it's not maybe to that level of detail, but it's about challenging projects or, you know, how you sold an idea to a client. So that's an opportunity, again, to kind of inform and get people involved in the back and forth. Projects like project kickoffs and project closeouts are very important, because when you're first starting a project, you want to get people excited, or you want to talk about parameters, you know, potential challenges, and so that everybody is kind of aware. It's juggling what the production pipeline can accommodate in any given moment. But I think more importantly, it's trying to identify the goals so that everybody is pulling in the same direction. And then on the other end, when you're done with a project, there needs to be some sort of way of capturing, you know, what was it like working with this client, what things went right, what things went wrong, so that, because of a lot of our projects are relationship driven, I mean, those clients are going to come back and we may approach things differently. So, you know, figuring out hours, how did we do on hours? Did we go over? Did we stay under? Why? All those questions are important to kind of, you know, to the business aspect of it, but also initially to the kind of the getting people excited part of the process.
Thank you.
In terms of staffing, you know, like just to elaborate a little bit on what Rob said, the whole 3D team and the film team and all the teams in the company are one team, but they are split into smaller teams for strategical purposes, right? And all of these teams are led by a senior artist, or someone like Seth, an art director, or someone like Matt, the technical director. In the New York office, we have also Hal and Matt Clary, Dan, and so we know, you know, we have basically every Monday we have our production meetings with all the senior people, and we talk about all these projects. We talk about how to help other people with their problems, and if you have trouble, can I drop these? Can he help me? I need to finish this, I need to finish that. So we are on a weekly basis and on a daily basis assessing, you know, what our resources are, so that when new projects come in or new things come in, we immediately know. Rod, the third founder of Neoscape, has a direct link to all those. We keep these documents where we have names and projects and due dates and stuff like that, so we can easily, you know, have a view of what's going on.
Is everybody thirsty?
Yeah, I am.
Hungry? Any more questions? One more?
No, I would just say thank you, guys from Neoscape, Jeff, but I have to leave now. My cab.
Thank you. Thank you all.